Right, so this news of a universal basic income trial being instigated in England has set tongues wagging a bit, hasn't it? Both for and against the idea. So I thought it was well worth taking a look at, putting the issue straight and what things are being said that are legitimately right and what aren't, both in terms of universal basic income itself and this trial. First and foremost, who's paying for it? That's what lots and lots of people are asking. And the answer is not us. The Tories have nothing to do with this. They hate the idea of UBI. Money for nothing isn't just a Dire Straits song to right-wingers, though it's a bit rich given how many of them are trust fund babies themselves. But it's how they actually think about UBI as well. But actually, this is all being paid for via funding secured by a think tank called Autonomy, whose work involves future-proofing the economy against climate change, for example, by tackling climate change, as well as looking at the future of work and how things will change for people in the future. They're a progressive bunch, which is probably why you've never heard of them. They aren't the sort to get invited onto Question Time, really. They literally have a funding page on their website, no less, telling you exactly where their funding comes from and all about it, unlike the BBC's favourites like the IEA or the Taxpayers Alliance, just as for instances. Anyway, this trial will give 15 people in Jarrow in the North East and 15 people in East Finchley, North London, where the cost of living is substantially higher, £1,600 a month with no requirement to seek work whatsoever. 20% of the volunteers would also be disabled, so as to see how UBI reflects the coverage their additional needs require too. Free money, as this trial would be. They also have a control group who are getting no money to compare how each get on over the next 2 years. Now, on the face of it, I thought this trial seemed a bit low, though obviously I appreciate the costs involved. And I'd also quite like to know why these two areas particularly were picked as well. I don't know them. I'm not going to prejudge that side of things. Now, the whole point of universal basic income is that it is an alternative way of supporting the basic needs of the population. Because right now we have a pretty chaotic system, don't we, where some people are eligible for one thing, others are not. Means testing, which to ensure only the right people get the funding they might be entitled to, means costly administration is required to deliver it and make sure only the right people get it. It means testing is an expensive way to decide who gets cash from a certain pot. Universal credit has been beset with problems because it is also incredibly expensive to administer. There's the issue of benefit fraud, which the government always keeps citing, and as much as it is a very small problem, compared certainly to tax evasion and avoidance especially, if benefits have been completely replaced by a UBI, there would be no fraud whatsoever. So resources could be redeployed where they are better used and truly needed. And if UBI is given to everyone, no matter their level of wealth, then the costly administration is largely eliminated as well. People will complain of millionaires and billionaires getting it, but by removing the administration costs, it would ultimately cost the public purse less. The costs of everyone's basic needs being met would mean an end to homelessness, for example. Everybody will be able to afford to keep a roof over their heads. Hunger. Imagine a country without the need for food banks back again. That would be nice, wouldn't it? It would give people a sense of security if their basic needs are guaranteed to be met. The unknowns are what kind of effect on people will such a radical shift in income have? Will they still search for work if the basics are being paid for? What effect will it have on their mental health? This scheme in England will actually be copying a Welsh UBI scheme already underway. Same time duration, same level of income. Further on in progress, in Wales, they're trialling it amongst 500 people as well. So it's a much bigger trial. So this little one in England will be complementary to that, as well as directly comparable to that scheme as far as data analysis goes. And I would hope that that can be shared and analysed between the two. It just simplifies everything for everyone. Is it expensive? Is it going to cost us a lot? Yes, but so is the current system when you have to factor in those administrative costs that would be drastically reduced. There are those who say this support should be targeted, but if you do that, you're introducing administration again and costs associated. With the basics being met, where is the incentive to work, you might think? A lot of people think, but actually this puts the power back in the hands of ordinary people. If you can't work, if you don't want to work, if work is not available, if the labour market is bad where you are, at least your basic needs are met. That phrase basic needs is the operative one though. If you want to buy a house, if you want to take a holiday once or twice a year, UBI won't be enough to cover that. Incidentally, for UBI to work covering accommodation, something is going to have to be done to streamline the housing rental market, which is a mess. Because right now, across the country, the disparity in rental costs, as well as them being vastly too high, as well as the pain of the cost of living generally, is significant. A UBI must be the same for all for it to work. So this is a potential pitfall. And possibly this is why two quite disparate areas have been picked for the trial, to highlight any issues along these lines maybe. Cost of living in both areas would be vastly different, I would think. It's certainly an issue that will need to be rectified, though, because some form of UBI surely has got to be inevitable. As more and more jobs become automated, for example, there will be less employment available amidst a population growing at the same time. The current model of working for a living becomes less functional, less feasible. I'm not saying this would happen overnight, obviously, but it's natural progression of technology. And if we're going to future-proof, as it keeps getting called, future-proof ourselves, the ordinary working classes, something like this will inevitably have to happen to meet basic needs. As a for instance, during the pandemic, when we couldn't work, locked down as the country was, a form of temporary UBI was floated by some 170 MPs as a possible solution to keep us all financially secure during that time. With the cheerleaders for capitalism in charge of the country, however, that was never going to happen. We're a wealthy country, but a very, very unequal one. And as such, poverty is rife, driven by food and energy costs as it is at this moment in time. But there's always something acting to suppress incomes, as is homelessness. That's by design, of course. Fear. Fear of not being able to cover the cost of the essentials in life is what is used to keep us in line. Working for our own poverty, essentially, instead of for a living. Not wanting to do anything to risk what we got, lest we lose even more. It's how those in power sustain themselves. A UBI would put power in our hands instead. Employers would have to offer favourable incentives for people to accept a job working for them. No longer would people be prepared to take just anything. They could be choosier. The fear of impoverishment, as capitalism relies on, would no longer work. The state of fear so many of us are kept in would disappear, benefiting us all, not just financially, but our health too, both physical and mental, and associated costs with that would drop. Healthcare would drop. Treating people more kindly with a kind of financial respect makes their lives more simple and actually gives us all more freedom to live our lives how we want to. It all sounds too good to be true, I'm sure, to a lot of people. But if you want to see how true it might be, then just look at the responses from the pro-capitalist right. People will stop wanting to work. Well, it becomes a choice for them. But to afford anything other than the bare essentials, they still need to work. With less work around going forwards as automation increasingly dominates, however, some form of this, as I said at the start, needs to come in. It's not like the country would be any less productive. Arguably, automation in certain industries makes certain jobs more efficient. But it also won't replace all forms of work because that would be impossible. You can't automate everything. Another valid point that can be argued is that it would leave more time for people to further their education or skills and become more productive when they return to the workplace, working in an area of interest for them that they had had time to study towards. At a time when the disabled are being demonized as they are right now, all of a sudden they become very important to the capitalist. What about their additional needs, they cry. Oh, so now you care. This trial will include several disabled people. We'll find out how they get on. That is the whole point of the trial. To see if significant issues do get highlighted and act accordingly on them. Tweak things to make them right, maybe. Less people working will mean taxes have to soar, they how? Taxes on who, though? Like I said before, productivity won't, in theory, decline. People who work will still pay income tax, but the tax levy needs to be centred on the productivity itself, especially if more automation is going on. It needs to be on the profits made. We simply have to change where the bulk of taxation falls, and knowing it'll hit profits and wealth, the people avoiding the pain the rest of us feel via taxation right now, UBI will simultaneously tackle inequality in wealth as a byproduct of adjusting where the burden of taxation falls. Allegations of massive tax rises being required just doesn't wash. It's unproven. But again, this is what trials are for. We'll see. People won't work as hard if they aren't in fear of their livelihoods is another excuse. Well, why is it right people should be afraid to make them work harder? Who says being happier and less stressed won't make them more efficient? It's just another socialist pipe dream that won't work. You socialists just love spending other people's money, don't you? But it's the public purse, not all of our money anyway. Why should it only go to people the likes of Michelle Mone? Why should more of it not come to us instead? When our spending power is what drives the economy, not the wealthy hoarding it offshore. This brings me to another important point and the allegation that this is free money. Of course it isn't. It comes out of the public purse. Printing money, which will drive inflation if not controlled by taxation. But if taxation and productivity are not lost, We, the ordinary working class, is not simply sharing in the wealth this way, in a way we do not now. We know the wealthy are getting richer and richer as we struggle. The system simply ensures we get our share of the wealth too. It's about time, isn't it? It's not free money when it's cash the rich are hoarding under the capitalist model, that we'd simply have a cut-off instead under a different system. Is it not our fair share? It's been tried before and always gets abandoned as another refrain. Different governments come in and ditch it because everyone getting a basic subsistence level income doesn't suit them. Right now, capitalism still dominates. You can bet a capitalist government going forward would try to make this fail. Working for a living is still what makes sense to most people. And I get that. I was brought up under that belief too. But when so much work these days simply doesn't pay enough to live on anymore, more people need to open their eyes here a bit. This really does require a very different approach. The belief that some people are more deserving than others needs to be ditched because we are supposed to all be equal. And this policy is a leveler. Many of the arguments put out against UBI are maybes, or it could do this, it might do that, it might harm productivity. If people don't want to work, but most people want to live and not subsist, so I dispute this. It'll increase wage pressure on employers, some are saying. Not necessarily when earning as much is no longer as important. And with people having more cash in their pockets, able to spend more, that gives an economic boost and employers would benefit. So actually, higher wages might become more feasible as they make more money. They'll end up paying more tax though, Damo. Well, if they're making more, how is that not fair? How do you know the robots are taking over, Damo? My job is safe for a while yet, is another. And sure, you're right, it hasn't happened yet, which is why it's called future-proofing. But we know more and more jobs are becoming automated. Look at supermarkets. 10 years ago, it was all manned tills. Now there's self-service. You know what you could do with a UBI, though? Find working for yourself more feasible. Starting a business yourself comes with inherently less danger if you already have a subsistence level of support, right? If you got that idea at the back of your mind, you always fancied making a reality, but never had the courage to start, you'd have more of a chance. You can be as creative as you like in what you choose to do, because UBI frees you up to do so. Imagine all the migrants that'll come if we're dishing out free money, Damo. There's a classic at the moment, isn't it? That we have a messed up migration policy has nothing to do with economics. We should still do our fair share of supporting asylum seekers and the like. But the current mess we're seeing is because of a refusal by an incompetent and cruel government to actually deal with the issue meaningfully, preferring to break the Human Rights Act or push it to its limits instead of negotiating new returns policies with the EU, for example. The Tories will never have a bar of this. Labour under Corbyn mooted looking into it but got no further. And Starmer and co will sure as hell have nothing to do with it. They're all capitalists. They're all on the side of people not having what they need, kept in fear of losing what little they've got. Contrary to what many might think, people do want to do stuff, like working to fulfill their lives. Very few people, despite right-wing rhetoric, want to sit around on their arses all day doing nothing because it is boring. The Green Party, on the other hand, are all for this. UBI puts power back in workers' hands. UBI is the basic rate of subsistence, a safety net for all, making financial decisions for you a matter of choice for you, not being forced to do something out of necessity. That's a considerable amount of power for people largely powerless in the current capitalist-run labour market. If your health fails, you have the power to leave your job without worrying about your bills, and equally better rights and conditions at work will be required by employers if they are to retain their staff. People will just have to treat each other better. The biggest danger to UBI trials and UBI itself comes from those for whom it does not work. Those in power now, those with power as employers or vested interests in ensuring inequality in the country remains. They will hold the country back. They will keep the inequality. They will keep the stress and the fear because their financial backers want things to stay that way. Getting UBI off the ground, therefore, even if these trials are an overwhelming success, will be the biggest difficulty of all. So you need people in power prepared to give it a decent go if you want to see this happen. And right now, that does mean voting Green. My personal opinion is I like this idea. But as I pointed out, there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done, particularly with people's mindsets, especially with the housing market for it to succeed. However, it would end capitalism as a system of exploitation. And who doesn't want to see that? And after you've liked, shared, and subscribed to the channel, because whether UBI comes in or not, I'll not be giving up on this. I'll still be here mouthing off about something that's got on my goat, and if you enjoy my ramblings, you still won't want to miss that, I'm sure. Meanwhile, don't let this be the end of your rant-filled day. Check this video out here. Oh, the difference maker a UBI could be, as instead of the government make more financially stupid decisions, such as suggesting a recession might fix inflation. And I'll catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.